What's going on, everybody? And welcome to another episode of Event Marketing Redefined. I am your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockway Exhibits and Events. Today, Jon Wolff, Global Events Manager at Lenovo. And we are going to talk about building a modern event marketing strategy from scratch. Jon, welcome. Good to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
Just so everybody knows, Jon was on our show yesterday, live panel show. It was excellent with two other head of event marketers. It was really just an awesome conversation. So doubling up today with him. So this is cool. Jon, tell me a little bit about why do you think your company was looking and when they decided on this event role, this global event role to be created? What do you think they were looking for? What do you think they were trying to accomplish?
Yeah, the business unit that I report into is the solutions and services group for Lenovo. So you know Lenovo for the hardware, the devices, the laptops. You don't know Lenovo for solutions and services. And they have really been, it's been 2 to 3 years that we started the business unit. So it was really a startup mentality to get this business from incubation to kind of crawl, run. So from there, they were really looking for someone to be brought in to develop a plan. So again, how do we build a marketing team? We have someone that's doing marketing communication. We have internal and external communications. We need someone to really help develop the strategy, build the brand awareness, build lead generation and opportunities ultimately so that we can shift the narrative from Lenovo as a hardware to a solutions provider. And so that's where I was brought in last January to build the roadmap, build the strategy, and kind of start making headlines and like, pause there. So making a name for solutions and services business unit. And so from, what are the events to the tiering of the events to how do we show up? What is the marketing message from social to email? How are we engaging with sales and really kind of developing the strategy, but also selling the program within Lenovo?
It's exciting, honestly, like as you're talking about it, right? Because Lenovo is such an established brand, but you're saying this is a whole nother section here that doesn't have the awareness that they're looking to then take. Like I always say, trade shows, events, brand activations, they are a sales and marketing strategy. They're not a cost of doing business, and they're going to go implement this and have you come build something for scratch. So first of all, I think that's awesome. I think it's super cool. Tell me a little bit about strategically, like in that section, like how did you approach it? Where did you start? What were you thinking? What was ground zero for you? And, how did you go from there?
Ground zero was really absorbing everything that I could within a very short time frame. So as I mentioned yesterday, we go through a process called STAMP. So it's really in the winter months, we start to develop what is it that we're going to be focusing on. And our fiscal year goes from April 1st to March 31st. So again, I was brought in January. We, in the next 2 months, needed to have a plan in place. So it was very much a drinking from that metaphoric fire hose. What is the strategy that we have? What is the business case that our leaders have defined for our business group? Learning all of that and very quickly within 6 weeks, kind of putting a plan in place. And I remember meeting weekly with our leadership team to show, hey, this is what we're planning to do based off of building awareness, building thought leadership, driving sales that we think will maximize the most from the events. And it was, here is the plan. We would get feedback. We'd have to go back to the drawing board, present it again. And once we got to a place, we then moved into that execution. And this was globally. So we were, in Ireland, in Singapore, going after these high level events that we could really maximize and allow for the most reach. And so it was back to your question, Matt, absorbing of what our business is doing, what's the strategy, and then aligning that to our pillars to maximize through events and ultimately pipeline and opportunity.
I think there's some good things that you said there that I just kind of want to repeat and hit on, right? One is the idea of a business case. The two is the idea of meeting weekly with leadership and presenting these ideas, right? Because, part of a business case is understanding what the business initiative, business's objectives, what are we trying to accomplish with this strategy, which is events, right? And then being able to build from there. I think you have buy-in from leadership, right? You're getting them to say, yes, no, what about this? Or, man, that's awesome. Love it. You're creating that buy-in. It must have been so much easier having that to then go accelerate the program when you then say, okay, now it's time to go execute, because there's no question marks. you're not guessing, right? You've kind of done the work with the right people. So I just love the term business case that you use there.
Well, and that's really where, it was eye-opening. So you would think, yes, we have a good strategy in place. One of the first within a couple months of being in the position was, okay, I know what we're doing, but now I'm needing to understand who are the players. Because again, I sit
Mhm.
in a global position. We have to work with APAC, with EMEA, with Latin America, with North America. And so what we learned very quickly was this event may work for us at the worldwide level, but for the geo, it doesn't work for them. And so what we've had to kind of rewire our mindset is as we begin the planning for this year, one of the things that we are doing is, and part of the revamp process was, who are the players within each of the geo? How do we get with them and the country managers? Because again, we have the worldwide, we have then the geo, and then we have that country manager. And this is the case for all regions, but it just goes to the comment, and the point is that internal stakeholder, we need to align with them, and we need to
Mhm.
have this strategy be positioned as, here's how we're driving the bottom line for you. Here's what the success looks like. Here's how we collaborate. Because what we found in that first few months was we're providing an event that they haven't asked for. And so for us, here's an opportunity, but for them, it's one additional thing that they have to work on. And it's a barrier for them. And so that's kind of where we've, as a lessons learned, work to make sure that what we're doing, we have buy-in from the get-go with all the internal stakeholders.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff there. What attracted you to the job? What was intriguing about it? What was scary about it? You know,
I
what
think
got you here?
the name of Lenovo itself was what was attractive.
Mhm.
Everyone knows Lenovo. For me, it was, here's how I can continue my career trajectory, and here's how I can keep educating myself, keep learning, keep growing. And so I applied for the position just as an opportunity, if anything, to have that interview skills, see what else is out there. And in talking with, because I had 7 interviews in total for the current role that I'm in, because again, we were a startup. There was not as many people as there are now, so they're trying to validate through the process. But the idea of startup, jack of all trades, you're wearing many hats, and certainly we're not a startup. It's Lenovo, but
Mhm.
we are a new business unit, and so that having and being a part of the foundation as we grow, having and being there really was what sold me. And certainly back to the strategy, really influencing that and building that from something that there's not been someone in this previous position. So I'm the metaphoric captain of my boat, and I can
Mhm.
work with the team to develop a strategy. So I think a combination of the name, the ability to develop a strategy where I in the previous role was just more of the execution. Now I have the ability to work with leaders and articulate our value prop in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Man, what I hear in some of that answer to me is that it's just more strategic, it's more high level, it's having that higher level conversation as to why, as
Yep.
to what's the reasoning, what are we accomplishing, right? What are these initiatives, which I think is a cool piece about what you're doing. When it comes to the strategy of building out all of these events, deciding which ones to do, which ones not to do, which ones to make adjustments, right? Globally might be a lot. Maybe we just say nationally, right? Just to make it
Yeah.
simple. But like, what's kind of your criteria? How are you strategically looking at events? And I ask because I often ask people all the time, why do you go to this event? Why do you exhibit? Why do you sponsor? Why are you in a 40 by 40? Why are you in the, curious? And sometimes I'm shocked by some of the answers. So I'm curious that evaluation process for you, because I think that is the portfolio planning piece, which is really what that is a very strategic thing when it's done properly. So I'm curious how you evaluated that.
Yeah. So I'd say it's a number of different things, but at the core, it's really the knowing the target audience, who is our personas. For us, it's IT decision makers, it's CIOs. Knowing the target audience is then now how we look at these events, let's say nationally. I'm going to go after IT events with a certain number of individuals. And from there, the number of individuals we should expect to receive a number of certain marketing qualified leads from. So if
Yeah.
it's 12,000 individuals, we may target, okay, from that 1,000 leads may come in. So that's kind of the target audience, the persona, going after the back to the conversation yesterday, knowing where the customer is going. So are they going
Yeah.
to the more industry events, middle events, and kind of lower? But then also for us, really, when we look at a sponsorship or prospectus, it's kind of it's three things. So it's speaking opportunity, it's booth, and then any additional like value drivers. So it might be a VIP lunch, it might be a workshop, but we are not looking at an event to just have a showcase. Because for me, if I have just a booth, I'm already setting myself up for failure. It has to have a very high touch point through speaking, through
Mm.
showcase, and then additional value drivers like a coffee bar that we did in at Gartner or room drops. Last year we had an event where it was a 10 by 10 booth, very small. It was the Gartner IT Symposium last year where we had a 10 by 10 booth, and I was concerned because the comment I just made, we just have a booth. How are we going to set us up for success? How are people going to know? And so I kind of very quickly work with the team. Hey, this room drop is available. We can get people this high end item into the room, get them to the booth for additional conversations. So it's just kind of, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to have the biggest sponsorship, but it's tactically thinking what is going to be a splash for the company, and what are those additional value add things that we can package on to the overall sponsorship for us
Yeah.
to kind of make the splash a little bit bigger.
It's interesting the way you describe that. So I want to get your take on this. I'm going to take us a little off topic here, but I think you
Yeah.
have a good take on this, which is, so what I'm seeing now a lot is you have a younger generation, right? That's coming into being the buyers, going to trade shows. And they're kind of like, what is this? Right? They're going to these conferences. They're not really sure. And in the day and age of social media, it is the attention grabbing is what's key.
Yep.
So I'm seeing people not exhibit, not sponsor, but go to the third party event where everybody is and leverage the fact that everybody is there. I saw a guy was at a couple events. He held up a cardboard sign that said something catchy, witty, and then made posts about it and got all these impressions and was talking like, I don't know what this did, but I got all these impressions. And I had to like really think about it. I'm like, man, is that what's going on here? Right. And I'm trying to, and the kind of conclusion I came to is like, all that stuff's great. Like, I think innovating and doing things differently and activating off site, throwing a party, not exhibiting, whatever you want to do, I'm for that. But where I think they're missing is what you were just saying, is simply, you're like, if we just have a booth, we're probably going to set ourselves up for failure. But if we have these other touch points and these other drivers and an area to do this and send someone here and meet them there, what you're really saying is, I want to meaningfully connect with my customer at this event. I want to have the best chance to meaningfully connect. And I think some of this stuff that people are doing, it can draw attention, it can seem creative, but they're not meaningfully connecting. And I think that relationship, that interpersonal at events that you are creating with these multiple touch points and speaking, you have a good person go up there and speak. You get one person that hears them right. It just kind of flows into the booth, into the sponsorship activation. So just curious your thoughts. I've been kind of working through that.
Oh yeah, I mean we can go off topic there. I mean, really what I'll start with is what we did at a previous event. So two events, because I'm always looking for those additional things that we can do. So
Yeah.
we sponsored a juice bar, we sponsored a coffee bar, these higher end things where it's a lead generation tactic. So you as an attendee have to scan your badge in order to receive
Mm-hmm.
either a juice or coffee. But what we did with that was, okay, now what? They got the coffee, they got the
Yeah.
juice. How are we, to your point, meaningfully engaging with them? And so what we developed was an email campaign where it was F1 themed. It was, orange you glad you stopped by the juice bar, pun intended. It was just, how do we make this fun? How do we send an email right there and then? Because we'll get the information, deploy a very quick thanks for stopping by the juice bar, the coffee bar, so that we can just say, hey, we enjoy the conversation. While you're here, stop by the booth. Or when, the last day was over, we sorry that we couldn't see you. We're going to then now take it after. And how do we have additional conversations and meetings? And regarding the one thing I saw in Amsterdam, I was in Amsterdam 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago now at this point. So I was in the booth, but there was an attendee they were trying to drum up business for these companies that were there. And so everyone that was a speaker at the conference, the company that they represented, they graphically printed on these skateboards the company logo. And they were going and selling to each of the exhibitors and saying, "Hey, we loved hearing you speak. Here's your Lenovo skateboard." And that was like, what is this for? And that got the conversation going, like, hey, well,
Yeah.
this is actually what we do. And for me, that was a very unique situation. Again, I'm not doing this, but as an exhibitor to an attendee, it was very cool for them to see. I'm not going to just hand you a business card. I'm going to hand you the skateboard with their company's logo on it. And
Mhm.
then that gets the conversation started and they kind of see a little bit more about what they are doing. So just
Yeah.
some kind of examples there.
Yeah, those little extras, those offsite activations, on-site activations, sponsorships, like how you get creative, I think really matters moving
Yeah.
forward because you are getting people to a city for 2 days, 3 days, or 4 days. And the booth is great. It's a hub, it's a place, you should have
It's a connector.
engagement. Yeah, you should be ready for the people there and all the standard things. But how do you get to them outside of it, drive them more value? Like you said, where is your customer? They're there. What do they want while they're there? And what don't they want while they're there?
Well, and that's where we even took it a step further where we have the top of funnel. How do we get from mid to lower? And so what we developed, and this is kind of what we talked about early on in the strategy, was what can we do as a additional incentive to get them off site? And so what we created were these lounges, just an informal area, but it's an opportunity for 20 to 30 VIPs. And again, the sales team is telling us, hey, these are the customers. So, the metaphor, we will build it and they will come. So we provided this opportunity to allow these individuals from that sales identified to come to have more of that conversation, get to know what Lenovo is doing. In New York, in January, we were at the National Retail Federation event. So Lenovo Retail Solutions didn't know that was a thing. We showed up to showcase everything from self-service kiosks to signage. We had Hamilton that we brought in to perform. So private event, let's get 20 to 30 key customers in New York to join us outside of the event. They're
Yeah.
already attending NRF. How do we maximize people there versus
Very cool.
trying to get people outside of that? So it just again to your point, creating these experiences that we're not just trying to have in the booth, but outside of it.
Experience, man. How can you get people remember experiences? They remember things that were done well. They remember things that resonated, that pulled on a string, that were just maybe just impressive, done the right way, fun, emotional, whatever it may be. I think it's a great example. All right, let's bounce back to kind of, your program, getting this thing off the ground. How do you know if you're doing well in your job,
Good
right?
question.
Like, how are you tracked? What are you worried about? What kind of benchmarks do you have?
Yeah, so it's kind of I don't know if it's an industry term, but so it's hard, right? Because the sales cycle it could be 2 months, it could be 18 months. And so for us, it's marketing qualified leads. So again, when a individual is scanned, it's not considered a lead. I know there's some people on that are listening that will argue that, well, if someone is scanned, it's a lead, it's a conversation. And what we then have to qualify is, are they interested in working with us? Is there a project that's coming up? So we take it from here's this conversation to here's the marketing qualified lead. And then working with sales, that becomes from a qualified lead to a sales opportunity. So for us, I'm measured on how many total marketing qualified leads and then sales accepted leads. And so there's kind of this path, if you will, what goes from marketing qualified leads, so MQL, we hand that off, we have that lead pass to sales, that's a sales accepted lead. So the sales is then reaching out to the individual that we made at the event, and then that might become an opportunity. But again, the sales cycle for us for services could be 12 to 18 months. And so that's kind of where we are working to show here's the opportunity that's potentially coming from this company.
Mhm.
But we're measuring my benchmark is what's the marketing qualified lead and then sales accepted, and just being able to show here's the growth year over year. And back to the comment I made about the target on my back, we need to sell what we are doing and not just saying, hey, we are doing events and we're spending all this money for no really return on investment.
Yeah. piece there, you saying 2 to 18 month in terms of a sales cycle, right? One of the pushbacks that I've gotten, not pushbacks, but just kind of like one of the rebuttals essentially is when people can't measure, can't track, or they're like, yeah, but it's always that the sales cycles are all over the place. And my constant reply to that is, okay, I understand that a sales cycle can be extremely long or extremely short. And that gap and the length of the long ones can essentially screw up that tracking, right? But if you never start and you don't gut out 18 months and then get to the 20th month, 24th month and beyond, it'll start to catch up. If you're doing it the right way,
Oh yeah.
if you are tracking, it will start to catch up. But people get lost in the fact that like they get 3 months in and it's like, oh, well, nothing's closed or this. It's like, no, it's like, okay, it's 2 to 18 months. So you're going to have to take your time and document and track.
Well, and it's so hard too. I mean, Lenovo is such a big company, and there's so many processes. North America may differ from what APAC is doing that may differ from EMEA. And so for us, it's really working with what we call lead generation teams and
Mm-hmm.
selling. Again, I'm a big proponent of selling up and selling what we do internally. And so for me, it's relationship building. I need to make sure that I'm building my relationship, my network with the lead team so that as we do these events, and we have the lead passes, what we call, they're not surprised and they know as soon as I get this lead from this event, we know how we were qualifying. And to take it a step further, what we did for our events is, okay, we're getting these leads that come in. As soon as you get them, we need to action them because within 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they become colder and colder. And
Right.
so what we piggybacked off of what another business unit was doing was 10-day to action. So effectively, as soon as we get it within Dynamics, you have 10 days to action. If after day 11, nothing has happened, we send an email to that respective manager. And it's not meant to make anyone look bad, but we're spending all this money, we're doing all this work to essentially hand over some gold to the sales team that they either are just too busy, they don't have the information. So when I do an event, I send an email to our team and saying, hey, this is the background on the event. So I put together a brief that's an event recap. So here's the highs, here's the lows, here's the content that we discussed. Pass it to the sales team. You have 10 days to action. Here's some background so that you know how to
Mm.
communicate with the individuals. And then you have 10 days to action. And we had an event in Amsterdam. Um, Day 11 came and I worked with the local leaders to provide them with outstanding leads that hadn't been actioned.
I like that. I like that you have that process dialed in, right? Because this stuff does have to go from events, marketing, sales. Does it go to sales? Does it go to a campaign? Does it like where does it
Yep,
live
the
after?
nurture.
Yeah. And there's a whole discussion in marketing right now about marketing qualified leads, right?
Well, and even
What really is a lead?
it's okay to have cold leads. I mean, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have things where someone just goes and picks up a promotional item. Like I would not qualify them as hot or warm, like cold. But what's good to do is we know that there's going to maybe 20% of our leads will be cold. What's that nurture campaign that you're going to have after
Yeah.
where you can push them into a Marketo campaign where you
Mm-hmm.
hope that they receive an email that creates an action for them to click. And then once they click, how do you route that to sales? So it's
Yeah.
kind of just discovery as you go.
I did an episode with a buddy of mine I went to college with. He owns a marketing agency called the Giant Goat. And Doug's real sharp, but he was talking about this thing called the Fibonacci sequence. And he was talking about it's a whole sequence, an idea of like leading up to an event and then after the event.
Oh yeah.
And it's a specific sequence of emails and a cadence and a structure. And he's like, it's just statistically proven to work. And he said, seemingly what you did, the further away that you get from the event, the colder that lead gets, and the less likely they are to respond or engage. So this sequence actually covers that for you, and not that you can set it and forget it, but you should follow it. It's interesting. I had to look into it and look it up and stuff like that, but it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Again, the amount of work that you do pre should be the same amount of work that you do post. It's not
Mm.
just here's the event, we're doing all this pre-planning. Once the event happens, let's look at all the highs and lows and move on. It should be following up, setting weekly cadences after with the sales team. Here are the open to even 3 months from now. Hey, these are the leads that are still open. Are we qualifying them? Are we disqualifying them?
I kind of started using the analogy. I feel like events at times are like a piece of fruit that you have to squeeze harder than any other fruit. But when you do, you just hit this point where it just like bursts open, right? And it's just, even Nancy, who was on the panel with you yesterday, when her and I spoke on a podcast, she was saying like doing events right takes effort. It really, really does. But those relationships, that interpersonal, those connections, those touch points. It does so many different things other than just drive a lead or
Yep.
add leads into the queue. There's so many more things going on at those events that it does. So it's you saying about the effort on the front goes into the effort on the back. I think a lot of people miss that and super important.
Well, and sometimes we're sales. I mean, it's funny how events wear so many hats, but also take the burden that, well, why aren't these leads being actioned? Why aren't these leads being
Mm-hmm.
followed up? And we're not sales. I mean, that is really why it's so important that we have this relationship with sales from the get-go, that they're essentially a seat at the table and their skin is
Yeah.
in the game because we are only as successful as our weakest link. And that's not to say sales is weak, but we need to rely on them to really help move this
Yeah.
metaphoric boulder uphill.
I makes me think I have a friend of mine who works for a medical device company. He's in sales and he's gone to trade shows for years there. And one day him and I were talking and we ended up in this argument. And he's like, trade shows don't work. Right. And I'm like, nah, I'm like, bullshit, And I
Yeah.
started talking to him and he's like, man, I've been going to trade shows for years, all this and that. And I said, okay. And I just asked him I said, let me ask you some simple questions. I said, what was the last show you were at? He tells me the show. It was a month and a half ago. I said to him, I said, what did you do pre-show? He's like, what do you mean? I said, exactly. You didn't do anything. I said, you didn't even know what the strategy was. So were you setting meetings? Right? What was your plan going there? And then I asked him, I said, did you speak to the event person, to a marketer, to anybody from your team about the strategy, the approach, the scheduling, the day, all the stuff that was to come? He's like, well, no. And then the more you just unravel it, you realize how disorganized it truly is. And a
Yep.
lot of companies just bring in salespeople just to have them there and they're supposed to sell, but they don't really know what's going on. And that work is not being done by events or marketing or anybody.
Well, that's why it's always good to, I mean, like, listen, what I'm saying here, we're learning as we go too. So like, we are not perfect by any means, but the sales within the booth, we've gotten into positions where sometimes we outsource people to really drive and start the conversation, so that by the
Yeah.
time it's almost like qualifying, we're just
Yep.
having someone there that's third party that engages, qualifies, and then moves them to the right person because
Mm-hmm.
the sales team, as good as they are, they sometimes just get to the booth and they're sitting around, and it's like we have to engage. And if we
Mm-hmm.
have to think of these external things to really help you, we're going to do that because ultimately we want to make sure that we're all successful.
Yeah. It does take a little bit of moving and shaking on that floor. It takes it takes being
Yep.
there. It really, really does. What about new events versus current events? How do you view getting into newish events and looking for them versus events that maybe you've always gone to? How do you judge them? How do you view them? How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, so again, the strategy that we have, so we have the what are the new events that we should be looking at? And then we have what I call our cross business unit. So what events are we currently already at, but there might be another team that's owning that. How can we tap into that already event to drive down some of those costs? They take the lead on the event. We can just help with supplemental content. But to your question, for us, it was what are those IT events or those events that they hit our target audience. We're looking for the most amount of people and then really trying to have influence in APAC, North America, Latin America, and EMEA. And then from there, over the last year, now 2 years, has been let's go after these events where we haven't traditionally been, see if they work, if they splash, and if they don't, we don't do it again next year.
Yeah.
We had an event in London, Singapore, where we felt it was the right event, but again, because we didn't have that alignment within the geo, it was still successful, but it wasn't the right one that necessarily fit for that team. And so there's some lessons learned. There's some,
Mhm.
we're gonna try to find the event that is most impactful for our value in business. It might not always work, and that's okay. We course correct very quickly, but we did have a success this year in Amsterdam where, again, taking that, working with the team, we found an event in Amsterdam that we thought was right. We worked with a local team. It was a new event. So we didn't have the traditional, here are the leads from last year. Let's target that for driving meetings. It was really much boots on the ground, working with the local team to sell up and to make sure that this is successful. We had a VIP lunch and it was a resounding success because
That's
we
good.
bought into the local team. They saw the value in this and they were really being an advocate for us. And so that's where, as we identify the new events with our, value prop in business, some of them are going to be successful. Let's continue that and do better next year. Some of them aren't. We learn. It's that stop, start, go. So we stop doing that immediately and just kind of see and refine the process as we go.
So a lot of companies get attracted and drawn into just the big events, and they don't understand that sometimes they may just not be great audiences. It is about the audience.
Well, and it's also the sales the minute they talk to sales, the sales team or person for that show organizer will tell them what they want to hear. And it's, as an event marketer,
Yeah.
our due diligence to really look at those numbers. Is that really going to drive value? I looked at an event in Chicago where they sold me on, I'm going to reach all these people. I went to do a site visit of that event. It was in a hotel lobby, which that's not to say that that's bad, but it was just in a hotel. The booths were right in the lobby, and then they had one room that was where all the presentations happened. For me, seeing that, it was $2,000 visit to go to Chicago for one night to visit versus spending $100,000 on the
Yeah,
activation.
of course. Yeah.
So it's a little bit of our, don't get bought into what a show organizer tells you,
Yeah.
to have that conversation, look at the prospectus, and then from there, do the due diligence and see, are my competitors there? If not, is this an opportunity for me to kind of break into that market?
Years and years ago, we were working with a company that wanted to go to their first trade show, a pretty big brand name at this point, and they were fixated on this trade show, but they had never gone. And they wanted to do this real custom big experience and all this stuff. And I just, for some reason, kept trying to, are you sure? Are you sure? They wanted to buy the booth. And I said, I'd love to sell this booth. I still think it's the best bet. I think you should rent. I think we should go test the show. I think we should do something small, creative, go in there, spot all these things. And they were like, no, 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 no. And they ended up not using us, and it sucked. But I firmly believed it because they didn't have the answers about the show. It was like they just were assuming. And months later, my contact reached out to us and was like, hey, man, like, you were right. And I kind of told him on the phone, I said, I really didn't want to hear that. Like, I'm not, I don't feel
Right.
good about it. But essentially, the cool part of the story was they ended up, we had some conversations, and then it turned into, we think the audience might be here at this small, they ended up being these small little niche, different style shows. And we ended up building these really cool, sleek little 10 by 20s, doing some stuff for them. And they crushed these shows at a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
A fraction of the cost.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, that's kind of where, as an event person, manager, specialist, coordinator, it's important that we don't get so fixated on just execution and the task. We really need to do our due diligence on being, focused on what is that event that's going to draw the value, looking at the sponsorship, really have a look at the fine print, and sometimes saying no. I mean, I've gotten so many conversations, and even today I got a ping from a team member that was, we have to be at this event. It's like, I go, okay, but why? Are we, what's the objective? What are we trying to do? Well, AI, everyone's focused on AI. It's like, I hear you, but I want to make sure that it's the right event before we just jump. And that was the case with the event that I attended in Chicago. I mean, our team said, we have to be at this. It's a really good one. It's been vetted by this company. Okay, well, just because a company said that we should be there, we need to do our due diligence and evaluate. So that's where I would say to those listening, if you have an event that you want to go big on, and you've not been there, first year is just go and attend, evaluate it, see what the competition is doing from speakings, from sessions, from the booth, and then maybe, talk about developing a sponsorship for the following year. I mean, that way you're spending a little bit of money to evaluate it versus going all in, and you might be setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of feeling your way into events. Like you're saying, even do a site visit, just you, right? That's always a good way if you can. If you can't, and you don't have time to waste. I mean, just feeling your way into something, starting small and building upon it, because obviously that budgetary spend needs to be watched,
Yep.
from event to event. What about like tactics at these events, right? Like little strategies for engaging people, what kind of thoughts do you have on that? I mean, what have you guys done where you think you do it well, whether it's engagement, the experiential side of things?
Yeah, so I would say, again, we're services and solutions. So what is tangible of that? It's really, how do you sell a solution? And so my charter has really been, what are those experiential demos that we can create? And there's two that really we've been doing that have been successful. So one of our offerings is consumption-based model. So you pay for what you need. How do you show consumption? And so when it works for us, what we do is beer. So we'll have a tap in the booth where it gets people questioning, why is there beer that's being poured? We get them to the booth, we scan their badge, we have conversation, and we tell them, well, this offering that we have is consumption based. So you pay for what you need, much like the alcohol, much like the beer that we have. We give them that, they're walking around. Where'd you get that? We have Lenovo branded cups. I'm not saying, do beer, but even if it's coffee, even if it's kombucha, like there's things that you can do to show that. And then what we did recently for Gartner was, so we sponsored the CIO reception. We had Shaquille O'Neal as our big wow, but the charter that I gave to the team was, what's the connection to Lenovo? And we had the US Grand Prix in Austin that was the following week, one of our biggest internal events. And so we took a slot car race and really developed to show Lenovo's end-to-end portfolio. So again, we're not working just in our silo, but we're working across the business units to show from hardware to solution, here's what we can provide. And we did it with a slot car race where, the incentive was, can you beat Shaquille O'Neal's score? And so that
Mhm.
gets them to the table. It's lead generation for us. We have an AI AR component to that where they can take the tablet and scan that over the race course, and then from there see both physically and then through the tablet what all Lenovo is doing, from sustainability to infrastructure, edge server. So it creates this aha moment. And
Mhm.
we use that at our internal events the following week in Austin, again, tying to F1, and just made that experience. And again, we're event professionals, but we're also storytellers at the heart of what we do.
I think those are two really, good examples because they tie back to what you do. And that's conversation I think that we're constantly having, which is ideas, tying back, stories, themes, narratives. How can you turn your value proposition or the problem you solve into a story, into a narrative, into a theme, right? Because people understand stories. They do. They remember stories and they understand them. So
Yep.
I think it's a huge piece of engagement, and you guys have definitely nailed it recently with some of those events and what you've done. It's good work. What kind of advice would you have for somebody stepping in the shoes you stepped into recently, right? Like someone taking on a role like yours, building out a program, doing something similar, maybe for a different company.
Yeah, I would say, don't be afraid of failure. I mean, learn fast, learn and fail fast. I mean, see what's working, learn from that. There's going to be instances where you have this great idea and it's sometimes a failure, but what opportunities and lessons can you take from that? And really getting out there and attending, industry events for professional development, build your tribe, connection. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of LinkedIn and really finding like-minded individuals in the tribes that you can really ideate and see what's been working or what someone may have done or been doing that you can take back to your
Hmm.
company or to your plan to really kind of enhance that. So a lot of things, from mentoring to professional development to learn fast and or yeah, learn quick, fail fast so that you can keep the momentum and ultimately, be bold, be creative, and that just kind of ties to my mantra of be bold in what we do, be creative, be humble, where, we are are part of a bigger picture here. So what we have to do is ultimately work with many different stakeholders, and someone has a great idea that you have to work with very different cross-functional teams.
I like what you're saying there, because I think what it ties into is the fact that a lot of this industry is under-resourced and undereducated. There is no education for this. There's not. I mean, you have a good background because you come from a marketing background, a more conventional marketing piece, right? Where you're taking those skill sets, understanding value proposition, understanding messaging, and now you're turning it into events. You're turning it into experiences. You're turning it into a strategic way of being face to face.
Yep.
A lot of people, for example, last April, we exhibited at Exhibitor Live, and a lot of the people there for the CTSM program, they specifically some of them are newer. They're learning, they're getting education. And exactly what you just said is they are seeking help. They're seeking to know more. They want to understand, where do I get this? Who are the peers? Who can I talk to? Because sometimes at their company, they don't have anybody. They're thrown into the fire and they're having to figure it out. So I think it's good advice for anybody. Reach out, use LinkedIn. It's really good.
Yeah, and I mean, I went after the CTSM program. I got halfway through it, and I'm not saying, pros or cons against it, but find your niche, find what you find joy and value in. And for me, that was certified digital marketing, because a lot of the digital marketing goes into events. I mean, from email to social to website. And so it doesn't have to be the certified trade show marketer. Really find what you think is going to provide value, because there is no education. It's, you are the captain of your charter, and find the education or certification that you think will be an additional asset for your, toolkit.
Great. Jon, where you mentioned LinkedIn, where can people find you? Is that the best?
LinkedIn. Yeah,
Awesome.
LinkedIn's the best.
Good stuff. Jon, excellent conversation, man. This is the third time I've talked to you, once with the panel, once prep, once now. Impressed with the stuff that you're doing. I think yeah, you see things the right way, strategically understanding the marketing. So it's a pleasure to have you on and talk about this stuff. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you having me, Matt, again.
Awesome. All right, everybody. That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.